Well, good morning, good afternoon to all of you, and welcome to our ASH Lectureship for Winter 2018. So glad you're here. My name is Gary Houck. I'm Dean of Arts and Sciences here at MCC, and it's my joy to welcome you today, whether you are a student or a staff member or a member of our community. We're happy to have you join with us. Stan and Blanche Ash, the late Stan and Blanche Ash, were wonderful, generous friends of MCC for a long, long time. He was our first board chair in 1965, later was our first MCC Foundation president. We have an Ash building on this campus and also an Ash building in the Greenville campus because of their generosity. And they gave to us a wonderful endowment as well for college enhancement. And the Ash Lectureship is one of the many results of that wonderful endowment. So we're thankful to them today and also thankful to the MCC Foundation for making this possible. And I'm very excited about today's guest speaker. I first heard him a year ago at Ohio State University. We were there for the Midwest Institute of International and Intercultural Studies annual conference. He gave the keynote address. It was powerful, very impactful. And at the end of the response, when a part of the audience was very significant. And so I thought to myself, man, we can't wait to get him here to MCC to experience this as well. And so we're honored to have Dr. Badrinath Rao with us today. Dr. Rao is Associate Professor of Sociology and Asian Studies at Kettering University. He holds both a J.D. and a Ph.D., a J.D. from the School of Law at Wayne State University in Detroit, a Ph.D. in Sociology from the University of Alberta in Canada. He is Canadian. He's also a native of India. And he has taught as a visiting professor in 5 countries. He's taught in India and China and Spain, the U.S. and Canada. And in China alone, he's lectured in 36 different universities on such topics as socio-religion, the economics and politics of Southeast Asia, and a wide variety of topics that are related to intercultural studies. He's currently working on a monograph on the justice situation in India today. Among his lectures, he has lectured in Southeast Asia, certainly, and in Ireland, in Italy, in Russia, in Ukraine. He has been in a wide variety of countries, I think Australia, New Zealand, and so just to name a few. So his expertise is unquestioned. He is a scholar's scholar, and for those of us who were on the India team last year, we're especially interested in hearing what he has to say. Today his topic is on human flourishing in the context of new technologies. On a personal note, last night he spoke on the economies in China today. We came outside of the parking lot and my car was full of snow, and he said, "Where's your brush?" And I said, "No, sir, that's my job." He says, No, give it to me. So he took the brush and he cleaned off my car for me. And I've never had a guest speaker clean off my car before, and so I thought, this is a servant leader. And so, sir, we are just honored to have you here today. Look forward to a wonderful time. We're going to let you lecture until around 10 till 1. Some of our students have classes at 1 o'clock, and some of our staff must get back to work. But for those of you who can stay behind, please stay for about 20 minutes of Q&A afterwards. So I'll come back and dismiss officially at 10 till, and then for you who can stay, we'll stay for a Q&A. So please now help me welcome to our campus Dr. Badrinath Rao.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Dean Houck and friends. It's a great honor and privilege to visit this wonderful institution. I had heard a great deal about it from Dean Houck and from my friend Theo. Theo Cyprus is a professor at Kalamazoo Valley Community College, and he is the president of the Midwest Institute of International and Intercultural Affairs. And I have been associated with this Midwest Institute for about 15 years. And every year I go there in the summer to conduct workshop for community college faculty. So I had heard a great deal about your institution and never had the chance to come here. But thanks to Dean Hawk, he has invited me. It's indeed an extraordinary privilege. What makes this particularly unique for me is the fact that it is a memorial lecture in the honor of Stanley and Blanche Ash. I understand that they were the philanthropists of this region. Family continues to support you. Stanley Ash was the first chairman of the MCC board. And more than anything else, the Ash family, I am told, was deeply committed to improving the human condition. I cannot think of a greater honor than being asked to speak at a lecture being held in his memory. I begin by paying my deep respect and homage to him. And in this lecture, I want to invite the young people here. And you will know why. Because people like me, those of us who are follically challenged, those of us who are, shall we say, young at heart, but not quite young, we have an ambivalent relationship with technology. Okay? But young people are the avid consumers of technology, and therefore it is very important that we talk about what these new technologies mean to us, how are we going to engage with it, and how might we be able to leverage it. Someone my age or beyond, you talk to them, they will express their profound dismay at how technology is wrecking the lives of young people. Now, this dismay, like any type of dismay, is pointless. Get rid of it, because it's not going to change. Okay? Infants will start using mobile phones if they haven't done so already, and that is just the way it is. This is the new condition that we all have to get used to. Now, it's very exciting to be young in this epoch. We are now going to be able to use more and more technology. The pace of technological change is growing at a mind-boggling rate, and technology has indeed enhanced the quality of life for millions of people all over. But this is also an age of extraordinary anxiety, an age of alienation, an age of fear of the unknown. So we are going through a tempestuous period in terms of our moorings, our values, our ideas, and our relationships. These things matter enormously. So, given this context, I see my role today as that of initiating a dialogue. I'm here primarily to hear from our young friends here. I want to know what you think about the issues that I am going to raise. And I want to utter a caveat right at the beginning. I have no answers, no solutions. These are big issues, and it seems to me that if we can initiate a dialogue, start reflecting on these issues, the solutions will emerge in short order. So that is how I see my role. I am going to talk to you about the revolutionary potential of new and emerging technologies. And I am then going to relate it to this notion of human flourishing. Yes, it is all right to have great technologies. It is good to have new contraptions, new ways of doing things. But what is all of this doing for our collective well-being. Now, that presupposes that we know what well-being is. And I'm sure you all will agree that there is a great deal of debate about what it means to lead a good life. That is a big question. Now, why is that? Because faith no longer enjoys the preeminence that it used to in the past. If faith is displaced, in comes a certain sense of cognitive insecurity, because we cannot live in a vacuum. People flourish best when they're anchored in something, when they're moored in something, when their worldview is well defined. And when that doesn't happen, then we get tossed around a lot, and before long, anxiety sets in. If you look around, there are many people, generally slightly older, who are, in some sense, rather poorly oriented to new and emerging technologies. These individuals are filled with a great deal of anxiety. They are somewhat worried about their security, and they generally are estranged from the younger generation. That's not a happy situation to be. Whether you like it or not, all the new technologies that we're going to talk about are here, they will continue to grow, and that is what's going to define our lives. If that is clear to us, the next logical question is, how might we understand these technologies, their potentials, their possibilities, their limitations, their anticipated and unanticipated consequences, and given the compulsions that come in the wake of new technologies, the ineluctable logic that new technologies carry within their womb, how should we order our individual lives and our collective lives? This is a very significant question. This is a debate I invite you to have with yourself, aside from doing it collectively with all of us. Why? Because technology has an abiding impact on our individual lives and our collective lives. So there are two types of conversations that have to begin, and I would like to arrogate to myself today, if I have your permission, the joy of starting this conversation. Again, there are no answers. You will perhaps suffer acute cognitive dissonance, but that is the whole point. Scholarship is a blood sport. As academics and educators, we have the unenviable ability to subvert one brain at a time. I've done this for a long time. Dean Hawk told you how I have inflicted pain all over the world. So this is my opportunity in your community, and I feel extremely happy. Now, so let's talk about these new technologies. Let's talk about what it means to relate to these new technologies. How are they going to be influencing our lives? How are we going to allow them to influence our collective lives, order our lives, and so on? And then I'm going to relate it to a new thinking that was propounded by Nobel laureate Dr. Amartya Sen. Dr. Sen is the Lamont Professor of Philosophy and Economics at Harvard. He won the Nobel Prize in Economics for his path-breaking work in development economics, and he is the originator of this concept of development as freedom. He also has written extensively about the supreme importance of nurturing our human capabilities. So I'm going to relate it to his theory, and then we will open it up for questions. As we go along, feel free to put your hand up if you disagree or don't like what I say. We will consider doing something else that is more interesting. Maybe I can sing. No promises though. Okay, so what are the characteristics of new technologies? Well, you know them all, but I am just trying to remind myself. They are indeed very novel, fast, disruptive. They are very subversive. Many of us do not care to factor in the subversive potential of new technologies. What does this mean? They have, these new technologies, a way of creeping up on us and literally ambushing us. If you are not properly oriented, if you don't know the somewhat insidious ways in which some of them work, you are likely to be a victim of new technologies rather than someone who can leverage them. So that is why I have put it there. Now, these technologies have far-reaching consequences. Many of them, in fact, most of them are very beneficial because engineers and scientists who produce these new technologies are driven by a vision. They are people who want to enhance the quality of our lives, and they work relentlessly to put out a new product, a better product, as often as they possibly can. The only problem, however, is that technology brings with it several unanticipated consequences over which no one has control. The internet, for instance, was originally designed for military use. In the 90s, it was thrown open to the civilian population. Now, the internet has revolutionized our lives. A young man in the early 90s called Jeff Bezos thought about selling books from his dad's garage. Today he is sitting over $1.5 billion. He's the richest man in the world. I'm talking about the founder of Amazon.com. Now, this is a great example of someone who has leveraged the internet, new technology, and has made it very big. Then there are others who have allowed new technologies to ruin their lives, and therefore we need to pay attention to these characteristics. So what are the new technologies we are talking about? The Global Risk Report of 2017 lists 12 new technologies, emerging technologies, which have significant benefits and risks. First, we are talking about 3D printing, very revolutionary. Talk to any industrial or manufacturing engineer, they will tell you that this is something that has completely changed the way they carry out their profession. You can use 3D printing to customize products to suit the unique needs of consumers. It is cheap, it is efficient, it is reliable, and this is truly amazing. You have likewise nanotechnology. All of the books in the Library of Congress can be encapsulated within something that is about the size of a cube of sugar. Nanotechnology has extraordinary benefits. We don't have too much time, and therefore I shall not dwell on them. Biotechnologies and gene therapies, you all have heard about the CRISPR technology, which enables us to edit the DNA. Now, DNA editing can have marvelous consequences. If this thing was available long ago when I was born, I bet my parents would have altered my gene and I would have a luxuriant growth of hair. I wouldn't be follically challenged. No, this is a tragedy you have to go through in order to understand what it is. I should have brought you my picture from 20 years ago. I used to be like many of these young people. Never mind, I'll be depressed. The point I'm trying to make is they can now edit your genetic material. We are in the early stages, obviously, but it will equip us to eliminate a lot of life-threatening diseases that people carry, but it also gives us the ability to custom design babies. Now, that brings us into a completely different territory. Are we going to play God? Are we going to order what kind of people we want to have in our midst. What sort of world are we going to be in if everyone is tall, if everyone is good looking, if everyone is like a film star? This would be a dull and boring world, right? And so we need to ask the ethical questions, the social questions, and the legal questions. Who gets access to these technologies? How do we regulate them? What if someone abuses these technologies? And so on and so forth, okay? So artificial intelligence and robotics, we all know, extraordinary potential, but people are scared because these technologies can result in joblessness. Amazon is trying to use drones for delivering its packages. Already, this company uses robots for all its delivery and fulfilling activities. It's amazing how much of new technology Amazon has embraced, and that means people don't have work. We have this phenomenon, therefore, called jobless growth. What are we going to do? How are we going to ensure that people find work? And if people don't find work, they will be forced to be part of the gig economy. You know what the gig economy is? You wake up in the morning, you bake muffins and make chocolate fudge and so on, and you do that till 10 o'clock. Then you do web design till about 4 o'clock, and then you get dressed and get into your car and drive an Uber till about 9 p.m. Yeah, it's great that you get to decide your agenda, but you may not be able to pay your bills with 3 different gigs. You may not be able to hold down a decent job. You may not be able to raise a family. These have grave consequences. Now, when you have such things, as a social scientist, I can tell you, people are forced to change the way they access different types of privileges. We all need care, we all need love, we all need intimacy, and if you do not have the resources to acquire these things in the legitimate ways in which we have been doing right now, then aberrant forms of behavior are likely to emerge. Young people here will, I am sure, appreciate what Tinder is doing to relationships. Okay? Now, some think it's the coolest technology that has ever emerged. Others are not too happy. Well, if your relationships become flaky, if they become flippant, if they become use-oriented, then something very fine, the silken bonds of solidarity that bind us together, that snaps. And when that snaps, you are not likely to have a stable society. So one has to be very mindful about this. There are a lot of these new technologies. Internet of Things is going to revolutionize how we organize our lives. We are just literally years away from a scenario where you can switch on your microwave or the heating in your house from your cell phone as you head out from work. You all know these things. I don't want to spend too much time. New computing technologies, quantum computing, for example, cloud computing, neural networking. All of these are very powerful technologies. They have completely revolutionized how we do things in different areas. Now, likewise, we have space technology, drones. The United States has been extensively using drones for its operations in Afghanistan. So someone sitting in Las Vegas is dropping bombs using drones. Now, the claim is that these drones are so sophisticated that they can even read the license plate of a car from space. But you know that in many instances, marriage parties were bombed, under the mistaken assumption that these were a bunch of terrorists. And even when they were not used on innocent people, we have significant issues that arise. For example, what happens to national sovereignty? If you can go to country X and launch an attack against country Y, then you have challenges in public international law, and these are unresolved issues. I'm just giving you one example. The most acute form of such issues emerge in cyber terrorism, cyber espionage. Someone who is a citizen of country X goes to country Y and launches an attack against country Z. Where do you bring them to justice? Choice of law issues. There are a lot of problems that we need to address. So bionics, for example, equips you to have limbs that are more powerful and versatile than God-given limbs, human enhancement. Now, if these things become easily available, then we will have to completely redefine what it means to be efficient. Okay, who gets access to these technologies? They are very good though. Okay, you perhaps know that when the Boston bombing took place a couple of years ago, you recall there were these two teenagers who were children of Russian immigrants, and they were disaffected youngsters. They put some nails in a pressure cooker, I think, and they detonated it using a cell phone. This was during the Boston Marathon, and several people were injured. One person who was injured was a young woman, about 21 or 22, who was an ace dancer. She had started learning dancing when she was barely 5. She was an accomplished dancer, and this act of terrorism, senseless act, left her without her limbs. Professors at MIT got hold of 200 hours of her dance performance recordings, and they painstakingly reconstructed all the movements, fitted her with bionic limbs, and got her to perform. And she gave a superlative performance with her artificial limbs. This is the power of bionics. The problem, however, is, are we going to make it accessible to everyone? If one form of enhancement is allowed, what about others? Who is going to regulate these technologies, and so on and so forth? There are these other technologies. I will not go into the details. Male contraceptive pill might be of some interest to young people here. That is on the horizon. Now, that can give people ideas. It can change the way you do you know what, and there are other things too. Okay? The point I'm trying to make is all these technologies impact our thinking. They change the way we relate to this world. Okay? Internet of Things, I have spoken to you already. It's a system of interrelated computing devices, okay, where you have the ability to transfer data over a network without requiring human-to-human interaction. Now, Gartner, which is a research organization, says that by 2020, which is just 2 years from now, there will be over 26 billion connected devices. Some even estimate this number to be much higher, close to 100 billion. Now, if we are so very connected, what if someone tries to disrupt these networks? And how are we going to go after these individuals? So there are these cybersecurity issues that emerge. Law has to respond to these challenges, but ethics plays a very important role as well. So, Dr. John Barrett, he is a philosopher of technology, and he says that the Internet of Things will enable us to connect with things, search for things, manage things, control things, and play with things. On average, we are likely to be connected to or surrounded by 3,000 to 5,000 things every day. Now, this is going to change the way we will live. Now, other technologies, self-driving trucks are going to put people out of business. This is a very big issue. There are 16 million truck drivers in China. China is not like the United States. They do not have a strong social security network. India is much worse. What happens to people there? Are we going to use these technologies because we have access to them, or are we going to take into account the socio-economic context and prevent people from accessing them? Or is that even an option? These are things that we need to ask ourselves. Now, there are several consequences of these new technologies. We've talked about some of them. Greater autonomy, your longevity increases. Young people here have to plan for living up to 100 years. Now that means you have to change the way you think about your career, change the way you think about your identity. Recall what Mark Twain once said. He said, the two most important days in your life are the day you were born and the day you discovered why. The day you were born and the day you discovered why. This discovery assumes greater urgency in the context of new technologies. If you are going to live for a long time, don't mess up your life, because you will lead this messy life for a long time. Keep it clean. This is true, right? That means I have to ask myself, all right, if I am going to be around for 100 years, then I better be nice to people, you know. It's not just PR, but being able to relate to people at a deeper level. So there is digitization, there is joblessness, loss of privacy, surveillance, very, very significant issues. Okay? Then there is security. Security of your identity, security of your transactions, and so on, and our collective security. You saw what happened in Hawaii recently. There was a false alarm about a missile attack. Someone misunderstood and created a panic. It didn't last too long, but something on that scale might also happen. Now, digital divide is a very big challenge. Half of humankind, 7.1 billion people in this world, half of humankind lives on less than $2 a day. You increase that number to $10, we are talking about 80% of humankind. The first question, therefore, we have to logically ask is, what do all these new technologies mean to people in other regions of the world? And if new technologies accentuate the differences, if they increase the chasm between the digital haves and have-nots, there are going to be grievous consequences. Those that are left behind are not going to reconcile to their marginalized condition. They will find ways to retaliate. Now that means you have to have a more elaborate security network to screen such people. Recall what happened when one person, a troubled individual, tried to blow a plastic bomb concealed in the sole of his shoe as the plane was flying over the Atlantic. One person. Well, we can't take chances. Now you try to board a plane, you have to take off your shoes. It's very bothersome. You will perhaps have more such circumstances to handle. Of course, we will try to find technological solutions to those as well, but then these are problems that we have to deal with. The other thing that you have to keep in mind is statistical measurement of performance. Everything is getting measured by metrics. You no longer can be happy that you published a journal article, right, or a book. People would want to know how many people have used or cited your work, the impact factor, right? You work at a JCPenney or Macy's or whatever, between 1 and 3, if you are in the men's clothing section and you sell just a belt to somebody. Your boss sitting in Dallas is going to send you an email saying, look, you sold a belt to this customer. Did you ask this person to buy a pair of slacks or a shirt? Did you tell them about a tie? And if you don't improve, you are likely to lose your job. Now, these things can create enormous strain. There is strain in capacity. Technology has obsolescence built into it. That can also play havoc. Those that have access to technologies become extraordinarily rich. You have oligarchs in different parts of the world, tech oligarchs. They will call the shot. They will colonize your life space. They are going to dictate how long you will sleep, how much time you will have to be with people, and so on. What food habits and eating habits you have. Recall that many people think it's very normal to eat in their cubicle while answering emails. Eating used to be a profoundly communal event, but that has changed. So we will have more such attempts to colonize our lives. Now there will of course be alienation. Marx talked about 4 types of alienation. He was a genius. He was able to foresee what advanced stages of capitalism would do. The ultimate form of alienation is being alienated from oneself. Now when that happens, some people sniff glue. Some people go looking for UFOs. Some people collect coins. Or people do all kinds of things, okay? You don't want to be that person. And for these reasons, we have to ask ourselves what we are going to do. Intellectual property issues emerge, as I've told you before. Digital footprint, freedom of speech, hate speech, very big issue. Our president repeatedly talks about the menace of fake news. I will leave it to you to determine the veracity or lack thereof of that claim, but there is this concern about fake news and we need to be mindful of it. Pornography is a big issue. 30% of everything that you find on the internet networks is pornography. It's a big, big, big multi-billion-dollar industry. Now, it trivializes what would otherwise be a very ennobling aspect of our lives. It is sex on an industrial scale. It diminishes all collectively. You don't want to live in that world where you are seen as merely the object of someone's pleasure. But that is what technology is enabling us to do. You see the global games market, $91.5 billion is what it is projected to be. This was in 2015. The number obviously must have gone up. Right? Now comes the notion of human flourishing. What do you mean by human flourishing? How do you leverage these technologies for your well-being? You have to go back to the Hellenic tradition. Okay? Aristotle thought about it long ago. He called it eudaimonia. Eudaimonia is the striving to become one's best self. And he said that virtue is the cornerstone of eudaimonia. Now, if we are agreed upon the Aristotelian notion of eudaimonia, if we believe that life is all about being our best selves, finding our higher selves, elevating ourselves, ennobling each and every segment of our lives, then that is the litmus test that you will have to employ before you take to any technology. You have to ask yourself, how is this going to affect my life? So if, for example, I don't know how to relate to the cell phone, and a lot of people literally don't. Okay, now my case is different. The only emails I get are from kids who are not happy with the grade I've given them. So that's all. Look, I don't get any emails of any other sort, text messages. But there are a lot of young people who get a huge number of emails and text messages and so on, because they have a big media presence, right? Now, is it going to help you realize your best self? That's the question you have to ask. If you are convinced about the Aristotelian notion of human flourishing, then you have to ask, what virtues do I need in order to flourish? Okay? Socrates, coming in the same tradition, said virtue is both a necessary and a sufficient condition of eudaimonia. Okay? This is Socrates. Plato also emphasized virtue. And there has to be, in my view, a debate on how we understand virtue. What does it mean to lead a virtuous life? People will find different answers. This is an intensely personal journey. A lot of people are anchored in Christianity, which is wonderful. Over 1 billion people in this world derive inspiration from the life and teachings of Jesus Christ. You may or may not agree with their worldview, but you will have to acknowledge that they are anchored in a certain perspective that gives meaning to their lives. It infuses their life with a sense of purpose, a mission, and it conduces to their happiness, their well-being. You cannot deny that. And if you don't think religion matters, well then find something else. And that calls for an intense dialogue, a debate with yourself. Now, Plato made a distinction between components of human flourishing, which are good for their own sake, and means of flourishing, which are good for the sake of their effect. So there are components of flourishing. Okay? And the first one is, what does it take to flourish? The second thing is the means for flourishing. You have to ask yourself, anytime you encounter a new technology, well, is this a means of my flourishing, my well-being? Am I going to be able to live a life where I am at peace with myself? Think about this. Young people have 4, 5, 6, 700, 2,000 friends on Facebook. I don't have that many. I really don't. But these are very flaky relationships. You know that. You can unfriend somebody, I am told, with the click of a mouse. And the person goes out of your life, only to come back again. Japan and elsewhere, you have the phenomenon of Facebook widows. Do you know who Facebook widows are? These are women who are dumped on Facebook. So the boyfriend sends a Facebook message saying, I've dumped you. And the young woman gets mad. She starts a website, idumpedmyboyfriend.com. And she says things about him. And then he says something else. There's revenge pornography. I cannot begin to tell you how ensnared people are in these sorts of things. What's common to all of these things? All of these relations are flaky, most of them. They're superficial. They're not grounded in a common set of values, a common understanding of what the purpose of life is, what one ought to do. Now, if you meet people in this fashion, if this is your way of living, you are in for a great deal of disappointment. And you must be prepared for it. Otherwise, you should do the hard work. And you must understand, for example, that happiness and wisdom are the two components of flourishing. Wisdom involves taking apart your preconceptions. Understand one thing, the most secure prisons in the world are the ones we build for ourselves. The most secure prisons in the world are the ones we build for ourselves. You are not going to attain wisdom of any sort unless you are willing to distance yourself from your preconceived notions, from your upbringing, your inherited values, from received wisdom, and unless you are willing to slaughter some holy cows. Now that calls for immense intellectual courage. It calls for intellectual autonomy. It calls for being cognitively strong, robust. Most of us are wired to be cognitive misers. Look at who talked about this. This was Plato telling us that you need wisdom and virtue. Now, flourishing is of two types. You flourish from within, that is, you flourish with respect to your own life, and you flourish with respect to the lives of others. Stanley Ash and his spouse, bless their heart, look at what they did. There's a wonderful building our dean showed me. I didn't see it from inside, but I saw it from a distance. Look at the power of a vision. Here was this individual, an industrialist. He made a lot of money. Now he could have socked away these monies in a tax haven and lived happily ever after. I and you wouldn't be here, right? But he believed in flourishing from without. He saw his own flourishing in the flourishing of other individuals. I cannot think of anything more edifying than this. This is the power of deep cogitation. This is the power of abiding thought, and that is what the Greek philosophers are inviting us to do, right? Now, human beings obviously seek a stronger sense of happiness. And Aristotle said that your notion of happiness, or demonistic notion of happiness, it involves human flourishing. It involves emphasizing living well. Again, these are all not issues that I am going to even begin to define. What is living well? If you eat indiscriminately, is that living well? Well, that you have to ask yourself. I drink 16 cans of beer and eat nachos and watch ice hockey. Well, is that a good life? Well, you have to make the choice. It's possible to do so, and if you do, you will develop flesh in the wrong places, but that's a consequence you have to live with. The point, however, is we have to make these choices, okay? So a good life is a life of relationships. How you relate to something is supremely important. To live is to be related. When you have new technologies, the first question you got to ask yourself is this going to conduce to my flourishing? And flourishing has two aspects: my own flourishing and the flourishing of those that are around me. The two cannot be dichotomized, the two cannot be separated. Whoever has led a life of consequence has seen common weal as integral to their own lives. That was exactly what the Ash family did. Or else you would not have this phenomenal facility here in Sydney. Okay? And look how many generations are going to benefit. Think about that. He will live in the good thoughts of countless people. Okay? And that is what being related is all about. Relationships are part of modern psychology as well. People have been thinking about it. It involves autonomy, personal growth, self-acceptance, and things like that. Lastly, I am going to come to this theory of human capabilities or human development. I have talked to you about Dr. Sen. He was involved in creating this notion of optimizing human capital. Look, in this world we have 7.1 billion people. I told you half of them are never going to realize their potential. They are not as lucky as we are. Americans comprise just 4.5% of the world's population. 4.5%. Just by virtue of being in this country, we are the recipients of a huge number of benefits. Now, are we going to be able to factor in the loss of human capital, human potential, among others? And that is what Dr. Sen is alerting to. He talked about development as freedom. He said, whenever you are trying to do something, when you are trying to develop as a nation, as a society, as a community, You have to ask yourself, does it enhance my freedom? Meaning, am I going to be able to use the things around me to enhance my human capability? Thus, for instance, if I learn a new computer language, it equips me to do concrete things. If I take a course, it empowers me. Any sort of development that leads to the empowerment of people is the sort of development that we must pursue. This notion comes from Dr. Sen. Okay, so he talks about freedom of opportunity, freedom to be able to access the good things of life, and so on. There are 5 parts to this. I'm not going to go into them. You have to have a whole range of factors in life, such as access to security, access to bodily integrity, and so on. And only then you are going to be able to maximize your potential. Anytime you don't, look, human potential is a terrible thing to waste. It's a terrible thing to waste. One person's potential has the ability to transform all of humankind. Okay? I don't have time, but I would have told you the story of the founder of Groupon, but do the research. You will see how this company has done interesting work. A similar idea has come from this lady called Martha Nussbaum. She talks about 10 central capabilities. These are real opportunities that we all must have: life, bodily health, integrity, emotions, practical reason, control over one's environment. These are things that we must have not for ourselves, but for everyone. And only then we will be able to leverage new technologies. So, as we conclude this presentation, here are some questions that I want to leave you with. Can we leverage the benefits of new technologies for everyone? So anytime you come across anything new, the litmus test of whether or not it is useful is it going to be able to elevate us all and not just me? Are new technologies accessible to everyone? Accessibility matters enormously, otherwise it will skew the playing field all the more. And when you do that, you're not going to have people who are happy. What changes are necessary in our outlook, training, and temperament to harness the positive aspects of new technology? We have to reinvent ourselves. We have to reconfigure our moral compass, our ethical perspectives. That is not an easy task. It requires a lot of work. Lastly, we have to ask ourselves, what is the good life? What does it mean to live well? Because, as they say, living well is the best form of revenge. Thank you very much.
Wow, was that not powerful? So glad that we had you here today, sir. Thank you so much. Alexa says it is now 10 till 1. So unless you can send your hologram for you in your place to class, we will dismiss you if you have a 1 o'clock class, or if you have a staff commitment at 1 o'clock, you are also released. We'll dismiss officially here. As you leave, don't forget our Valentine's dance this Friday night, 7 o'clock to 9 in the Cyber Cafe, live band, Bob Nixon and friends, and it'll be free with refreshments. 6:30, some dance lessons ahead of time, so we hope to see you then as well. As they're exiting, please give a thought to what questions or comments you'd like to make to Dr. Rao. He's going to be answering the questions, so when you do have a question, we would ask that you please stand where you are, project your voice as best as you can, and he'll be happy to answer that for you. We'll go for about 20 minutes here. Any questions?
It does not have to be questions, it can be comments too.
One in the back, sir.
Sure.
This is something I've always struggled with. It's a question about capacity versus what actually ends up happening. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on, over long periods of time, human capacity
Are you asking about capacities at the individual level or collectively?
Collectively, as a race, yeah.
Well, our capacities will enhance or diminish to the extent to which we factor this question into every choice we make. And so if we want our capacities to enhance, that issue has to be built into every decision we make. Otherwise, we are not likely to be able to arrest the erosion of capability. Capabilities have a way of diminishing if they are not nurtured, if they are not very carefully allowed to grow and flourish. So to answer your question, you want capabilities to enhance, to improve, then every choice you make, you being an impersonal pronoun, it applies to all of us, every choice we make will have to bear the imprint of this question. What is this going to do for our collective capabilities? Is it going to enhance or is it going to diminish? Because once you do that, you are auditing your choice and you cannot but make the right choice. Okay?
One kind of extension. Say you take the human race as it was 2,000 years ago or 4,000 years ago. What kind of change do you think we have? We're talking mostly technology here, right? But I'm just curious what you think. Like, what kind of change we've had since 4,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago, whichever is easier, and extend that out another 2,000 years. Do you see us at kind of the same place as we are right now, or are we much different than we were 2,000 years ago? I'm talking big timeline.
We are monumentally better than in the past. There was a time in this country they would not give credit cards to women because of this fear that they'd just go out and max it in 20 minutes flat if they got the credit card. The husband has to sign. Yeah, I know, you are appalled, but that was a fact. But women said, no, this is nonsense. We are purposive agents in our own right. We can make clever choices, and we need to be taken seriously. The feminist movement offered a very powerful critique of how we organized our lives. And look what has happened. Women have made extraordinary contributions, likewise in several other fields. I can only see progress because people ask the question that you mentioned. Now, if the past is anything to go by, there was slavery once upon a time that has been stamped out. We had a blighting type of feudalism, it does not exist anymore. This is our innate ingenuity, our ability to make and remake our lives through intelligent questioning. We have come to this point because of the sustained questioning that we resorted to, and if this trend continues, it can only improve. I don't think it is going to diminish. The point, however, is people must be willing to commit the cognitive resources for doing so. Okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Someone else?
Any other questions or concerns? Any other comments? Those that have been assailed by technology? Yes, ma'am.
I'm just wondering if you have ideas as to how to diminish the disparity between nations like the United States that have access to technologies and areas of the world that do not.
That's a very important question. And there are several things that can be done. But the first thing that has to be done is to see people in other parts of the world as human beings. You're not going to make changes unless you see them as people, as purposive agents. You see, there is this management guru called C.K. Prahlad. This man was at the Ross School of Business many years ago. I don't know if you had occasion to talk to him. He was a very far-sighted and smart man. He wrote a book called Fortune at the Bottom of the Pyramid. What he meant to say was that if you look at how our economic relations are structured, it's like a pyramid. Those that are gifted, well-endowed, rich, those that have purchasing power, they're at the top. Those that have none of these things, they're at the base of the pyramid. And he, as a business professor, was telling corporations, look, you are ignoring the people at the bottom. Individually, they may be poor, but collectively, they have a lot of purchasing power. It's not that they are not cost conscious, quality conscious. It's not that they do not want to access the technologies you create. You have to first see them as purposive agents, social actors, endowed with inalienable rights like everyone else, and you must create the technology that they can afford and access. And if you do so, there is fortune at the bottom of the pyramid. But that critically rests on the recognition that people, no matter where they are human beings with everything that it inevitably entails. So we in the United States have to begin to see individuals in other parts of the world as allies who just need a hand and can transform themselves into productive social agents. When we do that, everything else will fall in line. Our social policies, our trade policies, our laws, international relations, and so on, there will be combined synergies, and we will be able to reach out to them. So it all begins with a thought.
One last question or comment?
Yes, sir.
What do you think about humans reaching a cognitive capacity in technology, or getting to a point where we can't understand anymore because of the physical limitations of our construct of our brain? Or do you think that as generations keep going, the cognitive makeup of our brain would be constantly be changing for us to understand the new technology growing at the rate it is?
I think the latter is true. Human ingenuity knows no bounds, absolutely none. That's how we have survived for so long and flourished. So if you are talking about a computer that will outstrip us in terms of computing ability, cognitive abilities, and so on, that in turn will have an impact on us and will sharpen our cognition as well. And that means we will stay ahead of the computer that we put together in the first place. I have no doubt on that score. Human ingenuity literally is limitless. Okay.
Anyone else? Going? All right, I must confess that when I first saw the topic, and it was called the same thing at Ohio State last year, what came to my mind first was that we have a smart TV at home with 5 remote controls. And my son Jared had to write for me a senior citizen's guide to using remote controls for the smart TV. That was my idea of flourishing in the context of these new technologies. You opened our windows of our mind today to so much, sir. Thank you so much. Let's say thank you again to our speaker, Dr. Rao. What a pleasure to have you here, sir. There's a form to fill out. I saw many of them fill these out and handed them in on their way out today. Please make sure you do that for us as well as we assess these programs. Drive safely, folks. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.